talking about is our Swansea Early Years strategy. I'm going to talk about the actual strategy itself and some of the work we're doing with innovation with some of the local schools, and some unexpected findings that we had in relation to technology. So I hope I'm not a party pooper, but I'm hoping you can help me with how to deal with the issue that we're finding. So, by way of background, the work came out of the Marmot work with UCL, which we developed through the Healthy Cities programme, and particularly this link with health and educational attainment being linked to deprivation is well known now. In England, they had a baseline data at reception that they could use. We didn't have that in Wales. We do have it now, but we used local data that we had from a pilot of a Wales is great at this. They come up with these pilots and they don't finish them. But anyway, they had a pilot using a particular developmental assessment profile, and they did the classic. They brought it in and the head teachers hated it. So they should have consulted first, really. Anyway, so some of the schools used it. And from that data, we found that 75% of the children, it's about 1,200 children we looked at age 3, were not achieving their expected developmental milestones. Now, this is not just a few months behind. We're talking an average of 10 months. And some actually even 18 months behind, coming in at 3, and which was quite a shocker. We didn't really expect this, and we have a Flying Start programme in Wales, which is the sort of the flagship government programme in geographically defined areas. So even though it was known in deprived areas that we did have problems with this, they didn't really expect it to be across the social gradient as much as we found it. So there is help, but it's in very specific target areas. So if you lived outside that area, you had universal provision, which in effect was nothing really if you couldn't afford nursery. So the purpose of our strategy was to try and do it, the way that we're, meant to do. Actually, have a unified structure from top to bottom, through the council, through education, and through health, to try and get a unified approach to dealing with readiness, not just for school, because it's readiness for birth, readiness for nursery. It goes quite far back. And we really wanted to get it away from literacy and numeracy, which is very much what education is focusing on, to get it back to that we need to get to much earlier than this. We need to look at what we're currently doing, because like with everybody else, we seem to work very great at silos, and we don't really know what the others are doing, and there's not enough cross-fertilisation of ideas and services, and then develop an action to see how we can actually deal with some of this developmental gap that we had found. And the evidence came from the Marmot work and from the Wave Trust on the areas to focus on. So we've got the evidence, we know what we're meant to be working on, and then we were fortunate enough to go up to Birmingham and see a council that actually had closed the developmental gap, started closing it, and what they were doing, using the improving the outcomes type work, but also they had this strategic vision so that all the way everybody was working on it, reducing health inequalities, and they were universal service and targeted, which is not quite as good as what we're doing in Swansea, but we're hoping to look at that. And the important thing was getting families to engage, because you can tell people you should do this, you should do that, but if they're not engaged, you're wasting your time. And I think in public health we're quite good at this, but we're not very good at getting the implementation and the engagement. And that the data was driving improvement, which is really key, that we're using the data to monitor improvement. And the other thing that came through was actually raising aspirations, not just of the community, but of the professionals. Because you find professionals, and we find it in our area, if you're from a certain part of Swansea, it's a waste of time, they're from that culture, they're not going to change, waste of time bringing your ideas from West Swansea to East Swansea, it's this sort of thing. And that was a real teller as well, that we need to look at this. I linked up with a local primary school teacher who was in one of the non-Flying Start areas, so she was in with problems, with not much help really to deal with it. And she was quite vociferous about her annoyance about having very targeted children being supported, and you could live in the street next door and have no support. So she was finding at reception, this is at 4 or 5 years old now, this is not even at 3 at nursery, a lot of the children were coming in with limited means of speech. A fifth of them were still dependent on dummies and bottles. And of course then you're wondering why the speech therapy referrals are going up, because they're not using it. A third of children almost were not toilet trained. And a lot of them are coming in with challenging behaviour. It's all about poor routines and boundaries. It goes on. This shocked me actually. 84% not able to hold a pencil properly. Now you're talking our developmental milestone gap was showing that you're actually getting children coming in that are closer to being a toddler at 4 than an independent child, which you tend to get at 4. Now, I was a school doctor actually on the Isle of Man, as it happens, and I looked at all these children at reception about 20 years ago, and I wasn't seeing this sort of level of stuff. So something has happened, a cultural shift or something has happened in the last year to account for this sort of stuff. And this area is not particularly one of the most deprived areas either. It's a mixed school area. Not being able to count to 5, not being able to brush their teeth, and this not even being familiar with nursery rhymes. You may expect 20% perhaps, but not these sorts of levels. And this is a sort of quite a large primary school in a not particularly, it is in a poor area, but not one of the most deprived. It has intakes of 60, 70 every year, and this is what the teacher is saying is happening. So the impact of this, that and this is shocking as well, the children are in pain because they're not getting the teeth done. And we have about 3,000 full-mouth evacuations of teeth before of the primary school primary teeth by the age of 2 and 3. And of course, we think if their secondary teeth haven't come through, they're not going to talk properly because you need your tongue against your teeth to articulate. Math skills and colour recognition was affected. Limited knowledge of the world around them, and it's impacting on their early reading development. I mean, to me, I know I must have been living in a cocoon, I think. I just not aware of all this, and to me this absolutely shocked me because it's almost a whole generation shift to what I remember 20 years ago when I was doing this. So we thought we had to do something about raising the awareness because this was almost hidden. People thought we had a Flying Start program, this problem was, that's fine, they're dealing with it. And the Flying Start program does have enhanced health visiting and midwifery, and they look at speech and language, and that's great if you're in that program. But if you're not getting anything like that. The universal health visitors look after 300 or 400 children. They haven't got time to do the messaging. So I think there was a gap here, an information gap that people in power were not aware. So we took four-pronged attack really. It was to look at, we need to raise awareness of this. And we need to get the parents on board and the families realising what's going on here and get that information out there. So we wanted to co-produce a statement, which I'll come to in a minute. We need to look at trying to look more about accessibility and outreach and training for staff themselves, so that this is the problem. Just because if you've got every child in your area in a dummy, it is not acceptable, and it's not in West Swansea. You've got to do something about this, and expand the readiness for birth and preschool services. There's some really good Teen Start programs working with pregnant young mothers and fathers as well, and then looking at data and the quality of the nursery provision. Very much, you've got creches that are not nurseries, they just do TLC, manage the child, they don't stimulate the development. And the evidence is saying you've got to have good quality nursery to stimulate development. Just letting them play is not actually developing them, and we need to look at that as well. These are some of our posters that we're going to do a marketing campaign. When we first did the parent statement, I'm sure you can see the details a bit small. We did it as health professionals, and of course when we gave it out to families, they didn't like it because it was a bit patronising. It's like the law, we had full comments back and made me feel inadequate and all this sort of thing. So we said, fine, okay, you develop it, and that's what we did. We got community workers with families to work on developing the messages in a way that they thought their own peers and families would be happy to read. And that's really what we came up with. It's about playing with your child. It's very simple messages. I mean, to us from our generation, we think it's obvious, but it's attending to your child, sleeping routines, enjoying time with your families, reading to your child. All these really simple messages. And then of course we then fell foul of the Welsh Language Act because parents won't translate in Welsh. So we've got to now think of another way of doing it, but that's just something, we'll find a way around it. The other poster may be the way it'll go, where you just pick keywords and then and develop it. And why we've chosen the animals, it's about the Swansea Jack, which is a dog. It was lived in the 1930s, I've looked it up on the internet, lived in the 1930s, and it rescued 27 people from the Swansea dock area. And it was a national hero as a dog, so it is very well known in Swansea. So we thought we'd use that as the linchpin. And we're doing some local work with the children in Swansea, and they love it, and they're naming them, finding names. We're making it a bit like Blue Peter, but with an animated animal, so it's really great. And they really are taking on board with this. So we're hoping to launch this campaign to raise awareness in April. This is innovation on a shoestring, I've called it, because basically what the poor old primary head teacher has to do, whatever funds or grants they're using, they're actually using it to try and help some of these children coming in. And this was what really got me, was the head teacher said to me, you've got children coming in, the parents are really proud of them because they can use their iPads and phones and they're swiping everything. Then they start swiping books and pages and wondering why the pictures aren't moving. They don't even know to turn the page of a book. I thought, what is going on here? And they're not, and there's also, the communication is limited. They're down to single words and phrases, some of these children. So I think there's somewhere between the technology coming in and how it's being used has been skewed somewhere along the line. Anyway, Home Links, part of the work they're doing is this innovation, is they're actually going to do outreach now. There's a few of the schools that started doing this outreach into homes before the children come into school at 3. In Swansea we have nursery starting at 3, so they're able to do that. And they're doing some very basic things. They're giving them home packs. Again, it's funded from their own funds. It's not a national program, it's individual schools doing it. Funding little packs with scissors and pencils and to help the grip, metal knives and forks. You know, the sort of things you'd think the old health visitors would do, but they just haven't got time. It's basically what we're being told. And then we're going to try and evaluate this pilot. So about 3 or 4 schools are doing it, and one school has done it for about 3 years and had some quite good results appearing now. So we're launching our marketing campaign, we're doing the pilots, and now I'm linking it with the health board to try and prioritise early years, which is great because the health board normally it's all about very reactive and they don't think prevention particularly. And I'm really pleased that they've started, because they've now realised that community paediatrics are being swamped by all these children coming in with delayed developmental milestones and no medical diagnosis. So what do you do with them? And there isn't a service to deal with the ones without a medical problem. So I think now they're very interested now in how to deal with it. Unintended consequences. I asked some of the head teachers, because I was coming here and we're talking about technology, I said, well, tell me some good things and some not so good things about technology. And I got a very vociferous response back from one of the head teachers. In her opinion, and it's the one that I'm doing the pilot work with, she feels that the inappropriate use of technology has had a detrimental impact on expected outcomes, judging by her experience of the last 3 or 4 years, on widening the gap and not narrowing the developmental gap. I know it's not what we've talked about really today, but it's about the inappropriate use. I'm not saying it's the technology per se. She's seen children with limited communication and social skills, poor physical development. I know physical development was an issue because of the people getting fatter, they're doing too much screen time, but I didn't really think it would actually affect their cognitive development and some of their other skills. And I think what she's put it down to is being used as a pacifier. So actually we're getting electronic dummies now, in effect, is what she's saying. And that was quite a shocker to me, especially from our generation, it just wouldn't occur to us. But what is happening is that they're using it as strapping their children and buggies in case they run off. Well, yes, they're meant to run off, aren't they? I don't know what's happened to it. It's constant shit. Now, the next slide, you might either think it's a great innovation or a shocker. I'm afraid I'm in the shocker one. Is this really what we want for our children? This was one of our early years professionals sent me this slide, because he knew I was coming here. I won't say where from, but it was one that you can buy, and it's a stroller. And it has got a viewing area for a tablet. Now, I thought, ignorant as I am, I thought that was for the parents, so they were going to do this and look at the tablet while they're going. I thought that was ridiculous. But no, this is for the child. So any child from 0 onwards, potentially, could be watching a tablet. And it's being sold as ideal for busy parents. And so, to me, if you're a parent and you're too busy to talk to your child and play with your child, why are you a parent? So this was an absolute shocker, I'm afraid. And I said this is an inappropriate use. This is not the technologist's fault. It's not the tablet's fault. It's marketing of this. And I think we've got a problem. The technology is moving so fast. And it's not just technology. This is about parenting as well, and appropriateness of how you bring up your child as well. And people are forgetting some of the basics need to be in place, particularly for the early years. And I think technology is great for the older years once you've got your basic skills. But if it's influencing your basic skills, I think we've got to really look at it. And I'm really grateful from the audience here as to what work has been done in the very early years and the impact of technology, because I think we've got a problem coming up if we don't deal with it. Sorry about that. I don't want to be a party pooper. I'm only saying it as it is. That's it.